to the first ever episode of the Gentleman's Guidebook.
I'm honored to be the first guest.
This is my guest today, Liam. How do you pronounce your last name?
DeBoer.
DeBoer. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
This is the Rant Enthusiast. I've been looking to sit down with you for a minute now and just riff. You started your channel, it's picking up steam, and I just kind of wanted to see what you've been thinking, how you've been doing things, how you've been working in this crazy world right now, and also some comic book talk, man.
Yeah, for sure. Man, it's really weird. So yeah, I made some videos ranting about obviously what's going on in the world, large scale. And yeah, the reception was really good, and it wasn't something that I really planned on doing. That first video that I made talking about mental health and lockdowns, this was like back the second lockdown back in December of 2020. And yeah, no, I was just bringing up mental health to a couple people about how it's plummeting right now.
Yeah.
And everybody just kind of talked about how they hadn't heard that side of the story. Like everybody was so COVID.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, well, cool. I feel like people need to worry about this other thing that's happening.
Yeah.
So made one video talking about it, and yeah, it really clicked. It was pretty crazy. The way that I decided I was going to keep going with it was when I saw people that were extremely like anti-lockdown messaging me, saying I hit it on the head, and then also people that were like pro-lockdown,
Yeah.
like that were shouting at those people.
Oh, really?
And like that, yeah. You put those two people in a room, and they would like all of a sudden it would turn into like comic book whirlwind fight storm, and then I was like, oh, okay. They just don't know how to communicate to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's what the big divide happening in society in general right now is just a lack of communication between both sides, and it's just everything's so emotional. And then so when both sides kind of were saying that I was on something, I realized, yeah, all right, cool, we'll keep doing this.
You notice that discourse too. I've noticed that as well. People now, it's like there's no meeting in the middle. You have to be polarized on one side or the other side. So you can't actually I have good friends I disagree with.
Yeah.
And we don't hate each other. We just try to understand each other's point of view and keep it moving. And I feel like, especially now, you're right. It's like everything's so polarized.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're either left or you're right. You're vaxxed or you're not vaxxed. You're locked down or you're no locked. It's always just like it's a chasm between the divide, right?
Well, what I've realized what it is that, yeah, everything is kind of broken down into two viewpoints. You've got the right and the left viewpoint, and they're not even talking about the same things.
No.
So that's why they don't see eye to eye, because then they get into a room together, and it's like they haven't even thought about what the other person has been thinking and worrying about. And I mean, it's all in the news and how it's portrayed. I mean, we get on these echo chambers with social media where it's like, yeah, if you're a right-wing person, it's going to just give you conservative information. If you're a left-wing person, it's just going to give you liberal information. And like the narratives are completely different. It's like completely different realities. And you're like, yeah, how do you expect these people to get along?
It could be the same story even. Like the same story, told from different viewpoints, you get completely different stories. It's like broken telephone.
Yeah.
Which like kind of brings me to the Chappelle thing. Like when his new stand-up came out, it's crazy the kind of like feedback or I guess uproar there's been over this. Well, you look at the previous specials, I'm like, these are much worse.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
And yeah, especially with the Dave Chappelle thing, like it's so weird to me that he tells this heartfelt story about a friend of his that dies because of the backlash, like his trans friend that kills herself because the trans community came after her. And it's just like all of like that goes way over the head. Like I don't see how it's like, yeah, how does, I mean, yeah, he's making jokes, but like, you can't get mad at that and then not get mad at the space juice joke. It's where like it's like either it's all funny or it's all
or it's not funny. I've definitely seen that, and I've talking with you in private and other people. I'm seeing now the correlation. We've talked about this a lot of time to like film and comic books and a lot of media. I'm a firm believer that Terminator 2 is just a precursor to the Matrix.
Yeah.
So like when I think of everything now, I'm just like, this all ties in. Like this is what we're talking about. Even like stuff like I grew up on the X-Men, and X-Men was basically just like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. This is their viewpoints. Now they know about things. Magneto is Malcolm X. Professor Xavier is Martin Luther King. Two viewpoints on the same thing, handled it two different ways.
That's interesting. I've never thought about that comparison. But yeah, no, that is cool. And I mean, that's why I'm so obsessed with comic books and like them. They're archetypal characters.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody looks at them as these films you just go into for 2 hours and it's cool, a couple cool battle scenes or whatever. But the characters themselves embody these archetypes that have been all throughout history. I mean, even like the story of, say, Tony Stark. It's in a guy going from insane narcissism and ego-driven to full selflessness, and or even Thor, like a guy that has all this power and all, but he needs to become worthy of it. And it's like all of these things are just storylines that we could learn from. But I was actually listening to a Ridley Scott and James Cameron conversation about that, and I thought it was really interesting because they were saying how they look at films like books for our generation, but where there's that disconnect is that you can zone out in a movie. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to zone out and read. If you zone out, you're not reading what's on the page. You have to be like zeroed in. Whereas a movie, you can zone out for 10 minutes and then come back in, and it's just not the same. And that's why I feel like we don't learn as much from movies as we could.
The medium it lends that, right?
Yeah.
Even when you're like binging on Netflix, like if I sit down and I want something to decompress, like I'll watch Equalizer or John Wick. It's like I know what happens already, but it's like it's comforting to me now just to like watch it as is. And it's funny that you mentioned like the story arc is that there are everything is archetypal. And even in film school when I was there, I used to talk about the book Joseph Campbell, The Hero of 1,000 Faces, which is like the biggest. This is very, very big literature. It's like he wrote down, he documented and researched all the archetypes, because there's only a few that people just repackage and revise in order to make it fit. It's like one of those things when you know the rule, you can bend it, right? But if you don't know the rule, you can't bend it. So he just did that, and then every film is based off of that. Like there's a book called Story as well by Robert McKee, and that book is basically everything all the rules in which you do screenwriting and storytelling. But it's almost the same in life. Yeah. You're born, you go through, like every portion of your life is like a movie, and that's kind of why I find out we're so invested, or we get so attached to film, because you see yourself. I remember I watched Blue Valentine. I went to watch Blue. Have you seen it before?
I feel like we had very different movies that we were inspired by.
Oh my god! I'm a really quirky, weird. I think Blue Valentine is weird. It's about a couple, and it's Ryan Gosling and Michelle. I can't think of her name right now. The girl from Dawson's Creek, girl next door. You didn't watch Dawson's Creek either. That's cool. No. I watched Dawson's Creek. But it's a relationship, and like how he goes about finding her, meeting her, getting her to start dating him. And it's intercut with their life in the future, where they have a kid, and he's no longer a musician, and now he's just painting houses. And she's like, "You lost your ambition," and deals with like a bunch of things, like the whole breakup process, and it's heartbreaking. Like I've seen people. There was an abortion scene in it, and people like crying and weeping. But that's the power that film has on us. We finished talking before we were on camera, but talking about Star Wars and how much it meant to me. My whole life, right? I was never able to watch Star Wars until I was probably like 12, 13 years old. Probably a little bit earlier than that. But my cousin played a trick on me. She said Darth Vader's face was green. He looked like a reptile. The whole time I just wanted to see his face. Then as a kid, I just remember thinking, like the same way I dove into the Malcolm X, Magneto, Professor X, Professor Xavier, and Martin Luther King, I looked deep into this as well. I'm like, whoa, what caused these best friends to fight? So I waited my entire life to see episode 3. And it was a dog shit movie, but that fight scene was the biggest thing to me. I had such an investment into that.
Yeah.
People didn't understand the investment in that. But films, like, to me, are that powerful. They're just like, they are all encompassing. And I find such correlation to life in film. I learned about politics through Star Wars. I learned about philosophy through Star Trek. In comic books, I learned about all these morality issues that I would have never known unless I read these books. Because you've done them in life, but you learn them much earlier. Where you don't realize at the time when you're reading it that this is it. So when you post these things on Instagram and YouTube, and you have all these themed, you tie the theme into superheroes, I'm just like, yo, he's got it. He's got it. When you're like, yo, new one, check it out. Tell me what you feel. I'm like, okay, you hit it again. Like, this is really good.
Yeah, that's the thing is, you know, superhero movies, or even Star Wars. I mean, any of these movies, they're all based off of, like, they all had that base idea had to be built off of something in reality.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd have zero connection to it. And the writer of Dune was talking about it and saying how, yeah, all of his inspiration is history. Like, for futuristic sci-fi, it's all history.
Yeah.
And it's just finding symbolisms to convey that history to people. But I feel like that disconnect with people actually picking up on the fact that there is these hidden meanings and messages. Like, yeah, what you're saying there with the comic books, and there's an endless supply. Like, anytime that I want to talk about any subject, there's something to reference from the comic book.
No ideas original.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing, man. So I know you do music as well.
Yeah, well, not anymore, really. Like, COVID kind of shut that down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, like, I do want to get into music again, but not as, like, an actor, as an artist, like, under that. But what I want to do is start shooting kind of documentary style editing. You know those, like, B-roll clips in documentaries when, obviously you've got the shots where they're sitting down on the couch, the movie interview shots. But then in between, when they're, like, describing what the person's talking about, like the fast cuts and all of this kind of stuff, and referencing everything that's going on in the documentary, I want to do that, but then I also want to score it.
Yeah.
So, like, that's how I keep myself.
I like that. That's cool.
Is doing. I'd like to do film scores.
I've never even realized that. It's really cool. You might think of it. It's really fucked up. Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Yeah.
Where he's
He's
like,
yeah.
Good morning. He's like,
Yeah, that's great.
It's a cool. You never think of these jobs, man. Like, when I'm driving Uber and I'm talking to these fascinating people, we were both former bartenders, and I feel like that void that I had, I'm missing now. There's no longer me talking to random people at the bar. I get it driving Uber as a side gig, right? And I met this one girl, fascinating. Like, she was a bartender, and she was coming from like Ruby Soho, and I picked her up, and we were talking, and she's saying that she's now she's a fashion designer, like a fashion designer for film, and she started that out by throwing themed parties.
That's it.
Yeah, so like somebody came to her party and was like, "This is really dope. So like you should do this." And that girl basically took her on, tutored her to the point where she got to. And I think that's like, it's funny how you back into things. Even this, like, I would have never thought about YouTube or podcasting or anything like that. It's just one day I'm like, I got some stuff to say. I think people want to hear. Like,
well, yeah, and 100%. This whole thing that I've been doing, I mean, it's already given me more artistic pleasure than music ever did, which is really weird.
Yeah, because you were really about music before.
I was, and it was kind of a tough pill to swallow, but after, obviously when everything gets wiped off the plate, like my job, hobby, all of, like, where I was living, everything got wiped out by COVID, and then you kind of get forced to rethink everything and really contemplate, okay, that's where this was going. It's not a option anymore. But I started just kind of throwing stuff at the wall, and like that first video, then it just kind of hit, and I was like, oh, this is doing what I wanted to do with music, but on. And it's funny because I always thought I had to be artistic. I always had to think that I put what I think about or what I worry about or what makes me excited. I was like, oh, you got to be artistic. Like writing, I was never a lyric writer, but that's how the music world works.
Yeah.
And then when I just started saying it out loud and not trying to be as artistic, that's when it started landing. And I was like, oh, maybe music wasn't the thing for me then. In that sense, the best way to express myself, essentially. Entry
level, maybe you just got you in the door and then you figure whatever you need to do.
I definitely still love music from a sense of listening to it, but you know, I've heard a few athletes talk about it whenever they see there's kind of like there's a switch that flicks in their head when they just realize they're never going to be that like world champion, or like they're never going to get like they're not cut out for that cloth. That's where it was like for me, not a passion sense with music, but just being like, I just don't think I had that hit factor. Like that, the guy that I was working with, Joel, him and I that were working on a duo project beforehand, he's definitely got that hit thing. Like his lyric writing is amazing. Even just you give him 4 chords and the melodies he starts tossing out, it's just like off the cuff, just like instantaneous. Whereas like for me, I had to sit and twiddle with a melody for 4 hours and it still sounds like dog shit. And then he's just like this. And, it's just like, so, and then once I started working with him, I was like, that's that it thing. And like when I'm sitting beside the it thing, I was that's when you realize you don't have it. And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
It's like the guy that wants to play football and then gets tackled by.
This is not for me anymore.
Perfect example. Whenever I was trying out when I was a kid, I always wanted to play competitive hockey. And my brothers were always they always played. My one brother played AAA and high level rep, and then my other brother played the rep league as well. So my parents were always traveling with them, so I only could get stuck in local league. Yeah. And then I went out when I was in Bantam, which is like the second last age group for hockey. And I was like, all right, now my time. I'm gonna get competitive. Like I'm gonna start playing with the good guys. And I got rocked. At first, literally first drill, skating down the rink, head down, and just fucking rock. Wind knocked out of me, bruised tailbone. I was like, nope, not cut out for this.
Good Lord.
But yeah, so that's but back to the music thing. That's where it's kind of realized oh shit. I probably wouldn't have ever realized if I didn't make that video and just realized that people clicked to that expression of my thoughts or emotions or opinions, whatever they may be. This is just a more a better route to take for getting my ideas out there.
You know, it's funny you say that because I went to school for film. I went to British Columbia. I went for screenwriting, and I left, and I'm like, I have all these story ideas. Even now, I get story ideas all the time because I see so much media every day. And I'll be sitting down watching TV and I'll have a laptop beside me looking at shit. It's like my brain is not focused anymore. It's like I'm so inundated by medium hitting me all over the place. But I started out as a scriptwriter, a screenwriter, and then I left and I became a blogger. And I got a lot of traction blogging. Blogged for 2 years. It was like a whole thing. I had a whole vision of me completing my 100 bucket list by the time I was 35 years old. And traveling the world as newly single guy, on my own eat, pray, love type of thing, getting my Julia Roberts going, And then I was like, wow, I went for this and now I'm this. And then the podcasting thing is the people I got to do the first podcast ever was one was a guy I worked with, never really talked to him before. We were friends, work friends, acquaintances, I guess. And the girl was a girl I fight with constantly. She's very, very opinionated. Great person to have as a podcast co-host because she's not afraid to state her opinion, whereas some people will be very submissive and kind of going to a hole. So the three of us together, it was great, man. It was I'm like, I never thought this would happen, you know, from film, from going as a screenwriter to where I've ended up, and now this, a YouTube channel, whatever the case is, and kind of picking up steam. But I find that the same thing you had, and it's like, you're like, okay, well, I'm not that. I constantly struggle with that, because I can do a lot of things well, but I don't think I'm like excellent at anything. It's like, I could be excellent at something, but I don't know if I wanted to eliminate one thing. It's like artists, for instance. My friend, his girlfriend's a art curator. She's like, it's probably best to like stick to one medium and perfect that, and that's your niche. But for me, like, I love to draw. You know, I love to write. I love to do video. I love to, there's so many things you like.
If you can see, like, if they can all be worked in, like, so if you have, this is how I look at it, because I felt very similar. I was like, oh, I've never been great at one thing. Like, I've been half shitty at a lot of instruments. Even now, it's like, I don't think I'm some crazy good videographer, but like, my editing is half decent, my writing is half decent, and then the actual recording, that's the weirdest part for me. Like, getting into the mode and like then ranting to a camera is really weird. But it's like, I don't think I'm stellar at any of those things, but once you can just combine them, that's when it becomes like a unique, that's when you do become like a specialist, kind of, when you can combine different skills
together.
Like, because that's when you have something that nobody else has.
Yeah.
That's, so I think as long as they're not on completely different lines, like what you're saying, even the drawing and like screenwriting and stuff, like, you know, you could easily write comic books, put those into comic book strips, and then you've got like the best of both worlds. Like, how many people can draw and write their own comic books?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's usually you have an illustrator and a writer, but so yeah.
Yeah, that's it's weird. I just completely lost my thought when you said that, because I just thought like, oh shit, that's right, that's right. I don't know, man. I completely lost my train of thought. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. No. Well, even the it's funny because like that saying of jack of all trades but master of none. Like, when people say that, it's kind of insulting. Like, when you leave it at the master of none.
Yeah.
But that proverb.
Great TV show, by the way.
That proverb started by jack of all trades, master of none, but quite often better than a master of one. And it's like, it used to be a compliment.
I've never even heard that full saying before.
So it's like, it used to be a compliment, but then somewhere along the lines, it got left out to be like, no, you should be a specialist. And it was like, no, looked at back in the day, being like, no, you should be good at like a few different things.
Yeah.
I mean, you even look at the best business owners. Like, the best business owners aren't highly specialized in one thing. Like, they have to know finance. They have to know customer service. They have to know branding. They have to know marketing.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just, there's no business owner that's like, oh, I'm just this one specialist. And like, otherwise, how could you get a business off the ground? Because you can't afford to pay all those different people right off the hop. So yeah, I don't know. I look at the, like, having skills in many different realms as a very good
quality.
Yeah.
So I got my point back. I remembered it now. So I watched this movie called A Decade Under the Influence, probably about 2004, almost 20 years ago, 17 or whatever. Documentary based on the 70s, guerrilla filmmaking, like people who did Easy Rider and Chinatown, like all these old classic films. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And there's something that Jack Nicholson said in that movie, and it's stuck with me since the day I heard it till now. He said that, you know, there was no plan B, it was only a plan A. And if I didn't succeed at this, I'd be homeless. I told my mom that, and she almost cried. She's like, no, you can't do that. You need plans. You can't just focus on one thing. And it lends, it's like a tug of war almost, because, you know, another great film, like one of my favorite kung fu movies of all time, The Five Deadly Venoms. Mm-hmm. Don't know if you've heard of it. But the master trained 5 students all in specific techniques. And some of them became bad. They never knew what they looked like. They all wore masks. Mm. So some became bad, some were good. But the ones that were bad needed to be stopped because their style he would know that this is the person I trained because of their style. So he trained one pupil. He said he would take no more pupils, took one guy and trained him in all the 5 techniques, but he was not an expert in any of them. So in order for him to topple the bad guys, he had to hook up with one of the good guys who's an expert in that particular technique. And I thought to myself, I always wanted to be the dude that knows all the different techniques.
Yeah.
You know, because he could be proficient enough to hold his own, but you put him up next to someone that's a specialist or an expert, and the sky's the limit. And it's constantly a battle between those two realms of thinking. Because at some points I'm like, man, shit, like I need to really just focus in on one thing and get really good at it. And then I'm like, fuck, man, like I want to start designing clothes. I want to do my drawings. It's always a tug of war in your brain, and I find a lot of time I have to like calm myself down and just like breathe and like focus. Okay, today this is what I'm gonna do. You know, I'll get this done and then move to the next thing. But like you said, it's probably best to incorporate all of that. That's kind of the idea behind this. It's like I remember one day I was sitting around, just when I just started growing up, you have a nice, beautiful beard. And I was thinking to myself, man, it's kind of patchy. Like, there's nothing on any kind of medium that I saw other than one guy on YouTube that talks about like how a black dude could grow his beard, like because the skin texture is different, right? And I'm like, shit, man, that would be really useful. Then I just started thinking of like random weird shit, like just man shit.
Yeah.
And it's like I wanted a place like, what's that show called? The Man Show back in the day. I wanted somewhere where like dudes can like riff off each other. You know, like where they can actually, you know, you doing this, and if somebody comes in as a filmmaker and they're like, "Oh, I need a score for a movie," I'm like, "I've got the perfect guy for you." Yeah. He's just started. I like that. I like that reciprocity where people aren't looking to, like, you know, most times I tell my best friend this all the time. I told him, you know, I go to the same mechanic because I know I can trust them. Mechanics are hard to trust. You can't. It's hard to find a mechanic you can trust.
You don't know whether he's ripping you off.
Exactly. Because
you need this, this, and this.
Yeah. And if Mr. Luby go there, they tell you everything.
Yeah.
Have them tell you your car's fucking pooch.
Yeah.
Right? So I always try to stick to someone that I trust. And I always say it's like it's very short-sighted when people think that they try to gouge you up front to get what they can get. I know I'm going off on a tangent here.
No.
To get what they can get, but they don't think about the back end.
Yeah.
And that's generally how I look at all my interactions with people. It's not what I'm trying to get from you. It's more of what can I offer, what services can I offer you in order to help you grow, and we grow together.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where this whole idea for the Gentleman's Guidebook came from, and like also the whole thing with like kind of putting two skills together in order to find one all-encompassing Galactus type of power. You know that the Gentleman's Guidebook. That's a perfect place to put all of that in there. Like, how do you dress? Like, how do you like take care of your beard? Yeah.
I don't do shit.
Well, you see me, man. All kinds of creepy shit, man.
And then I'm the worst for that. I've had the same clothes for 2.5 years. I haven't bought a piece of clothing in so long.
Where do we go? There's nowhere to go.
Yeah, that's true. But like having that place, I mean, even if just the climate of the world right now, like there's not really a place for that, like for a man's hub. Yeah. Like I mean, when it's looked at as exclusive or as I'm trying to think of a better word than exclusive, but it's really weird to me that any sense of masculinity or fostering masculinity is like shamed upon nowadays. You kind of just segued right where I want to talk about. I love that you just went there. I wrote a script about toxic masculinity, and it's like it's a joke because it's like I'm check every box. Yeah. And it's like I don't think I've ever had that interaction with like people where they would think it, but I look at the checklist of toxic masculinity and I'm like everyone, like that's me. But it's really weird that you get shamed just for that side of things, and it'd be really cool to have a hub to be like, how do you become a gentleman, not just this like fuck boy. Yeah. I find that when I was bartending,
so much older than most of the people I work with. It's like, dude, like, I remember, I'm gonna finish that and then get back to this, but I was like, dude, like, what are you thinking? Just like fucking around and like, these girls will talk to each other, bro. And it reminds me of a time when I was in high school. It's like, one of my friends is like, yo, I just get what I want and I get off and it's all cool. I'm like, dude, that girl talks to all her girlfriends. You should tell them all that your reputation's for shit.
Yeah.
So you're garbage. But the funny thing about toxic masculinity, which is really interesting, is that all the traits that are considered now toxic are admirable traits once upon a time, pre-COVID, to women. Like all these assertive, I'm not talking about like the douchey, negging, not that kind of shit,
yeah.
but the assertive, the decision making, you know, the posture, the way you're manicured, if you're clean, if your apartment's clean, like, can you cook? Like, I know those aren't all traits for toxic masculinity, but when you look at certain traits that are deemed toxic, it's like, okay.
I can name most of them.
Okay,
self-sufficiency, emotional disconnect. Yeah, they say self-sufficiency.
I would never put that in.
That's where I'm like, that's everything I want. I want to be like completely self-sufficient.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to rely on
anybody else.
Like, I think that's not even just a male thing. Like, that should just be everybody. Like, we shouldn't have it that if somebody takes something or like turns their back on us that we're fucked.
Yeah.
You should be self-sufficient. The other ones were emotional disconnect, like not showing emotions. And this is where I go to that, like, they say that's like a male trait, and I look at the people that they would cast that toxic label on. Like, it's not that they hide their emotions, it's they have no idea how to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like people have never, especially dudes and with emotions and like shutting. I mean, how many? Dude, I used to say it, be like, oh, I don't have emotions.
Yeah.
Like thinking you can just shove them down and be like, nah, it's like I don't have them. But that's not like masculinity to me. Like these ideas that's toxic masculinity, and then making masculinity this thing that isn't something you should achieve.
Mm-hmm.
That it's this negative thing. I'm like, but that's not it. Like, you're not classifying actual masculinity. You're taking people that don't know how to convey their emotions, but also like when you understand your emotions, you don't have to communicate them.
No.
And that's something where I'm like, that's something everybody should learn. Like, to understand your emotions, where they came from. But like, if you can do that, you don't have to talk about them all the time.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, so for me, it's like, I'd be considered toxic for that, where it's like everybody around me, I don't talk about my emotions. It's funny, I'll talk and rant to a camera and be like, this is everything that was fucked in my life. Like, this is like the social anxiety, this is the depression, this is that. But I'm going back through it as like an analyst, like as an analyst, being like, this is what I see from my past. But like, as stuff I'm going through in the moment, like, nah, I'm not talking to anybody about that. Like, I'm figuring it out in my own head at the moment. But.
And that's interesting because, I get asked a lot of questions about dating, and not so much now because people don't really date anymore, but before, like, a lot of these traits that were considered, well, they weren't, I don't know what the opposite of toxic masculinity is. People would say this term all the time, nice guys finish last.
Yeah.
And the way society is now, it's like nice guys are the epitome of what a masculine man should be. But those feelings of those traits of expressing your feelings before was looked at as a very beta way of going about anything. Like, those weren't attractive qualities before, to see now it's completely flipped, It's crazy because I know you're just about to say. I just think it's interesting how we've kind of reversed what manhood is. It lends the question, like, what is manhood?
Yeah.
Fight Club was one of my favorite films and books, and the major cusp of that was manhood.
Yeah. Like,
what is a man? In today's climate and society, we're being raised by single women.
Yeah.
So how do you define what a man is? What is a man?
Yeah. So this is what I actually find really interesting about the conversation about masculinity. They just take things away that like men shouldn't do anymore, but they fail to provide a substitute.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, one of the things that is kind of changing is everybody saying that a man shouldn't be the sole provider for a family. Like that was essentially the male's task growing up. But then you're like, okay, so what should that guy do then? If his sole purpose is not to provide for his family anymore, you don't want it to be. You have to replace that purpose with something like that. Like meaning is everything in life. Like that's our driving principle. Like there's no real such thing as happiness. It's just brain chemicals, serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, and endorphins. Like that's happiness. They will not stick around forever. They come and go. Mm-hmm. But like what you need is meaning and purpose. And like so, yeah, you can't just take away the meaning and purpose of something and then not
fill it up with something
else. And what's super interesting is even though that conversation is going that route, still 71% of people say that a male should provide for his family. Yeah. And that's equally between women and men. So you're like, we have this social thing where like we're saying like, oh no, that's not a male's responsibility anymore, but like inside of the household, it still very much is looked at that way. And then that's where it's like, yeah, confusing. I mean, I think even you see like the rise of guys like Jordan Peterson, and you're like, yeah, he's the ultimate dad figure essentially. Like the world's missing that at the moment. Like even I mean with this divorce rates going like 90% of divorces, the kids end up with the mother, and it's like kids are being deprived of a masculine role model while they're growing up, and that's actually like the real reason I believe for anything that would be considered toxic masculinity is like fatherlessness, like the lack of masculinity growing up, like not understanding how to harness essentially what those true masculine traits, like how to harness them, how to use them, like not be used by them. There's no real conversation going on.
There's no guide either. It's like it's funny that you mentioned I'll get back to the point I was saying before, but I like you talked. So I wanted to piggyback off it. The fact that marrying rich was like something that mothers would tell daughters before. Marry someone who's got money, or marry someone who's a provider. I know people now who just want to be housewives. Yeah. They want to get married so they can just chill at home and raise kids. And
I'll go the house dad route. If there's any stellar CEO women out there just looking for a trophy husband, I would gladly be a trophy husband.
It's strange the whole theory and the whole causality of it, the cause and effect of you remove the father, but you don't have anything to replace it with, and that's usually what happens in like lower income homes. That's why they turn to other forms of male figures that are strong. It's one of those things as a kid, you're just like unbound energy. I remember as a child, I was crazy. Yeah, I was absolutely a nut bar, and a lot of people can attest to this because they've known me this whole period of time. But like, it took me a long time to like actually my eat, pray, love moment in life is where I actually got to sit down and think. And I find that people don't, especially men, don't have the time to actually, or don't put emphasis enough on it to sit and think what your feelings are, what your goals are, what your reviews are, and actually coming to basically building yourself into somebody that's, I don't want to say a man, but a person, like an all-around good person. I'm gonna use another movie, or like The Matrix, for instance, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. For sure. And the whole thing is just like the guy's been sleeping this whole time. He's living in a dream. And I feel like most people, like you live in your life and you walk through it you're almost just counting down days until you die. It's how most people live their lives. And they don't ever really take the time in order to catalog what they've done, where they're going, what they're doing now, and appreciate the moment they're in now. One of my good friends, he always tells me to come. We were driving the other day, and I was losing my shit. And I don't ever lose my shit when I'm driving working, but I'm losing my shit in the car. He's like, puts his hand in my chest, like, bro, calm down. Like, you don't know what's going on in their day, just fucking leave it, man. And instantly, just like melted away. But even that, as like a little short diatribe between two friends, that doesn't regularly happen. Like, that's like two people who have talked about things and rationed it out. My dad would always say reason. He's like, come with me, let's reason. And he'd sit there and talk about different things. And that's kind of how I've built myself into who I am today, based on my dad and other strong male figures I've had and been fortunate enough to have. And I feel like it's almost disingenuous, because I don't have children, right? To not pass that on to people I know, like there's a lot of people I work with that I just try to like put them on to something else. And like, you want to do that? Let's get you there. I remember the first thing I used to do when I started as a shift leader working at Jack Astor's, it's like, we have the team huddle in the morning, or before the shift starts, and I'd be like, okay, how much money you want to make? How much money you want to make? How much money you want to make? They tell me all the numbers. I'm like, let's all get them together. And we're just like busting everybody's section together. We're running drinks together. We're running food together. Like at the end of the night, we're like, did you get there? Did you get there? Okay, let's go out drinking. It's like this whole, like I said, it's going to come into effect again. This reciprocity thing. It's like, I love to see people winning. And I love especially to see my friends winning. And I feel like
quality, because not a lot of people have that. Like, everybody talks about it. The amount of people that I see posting support your friends and support local and stuff online, but then never actually, like, I'll see them post that sentiment, but then never actually do anything.
Real action behind it.
And I'm like, yeah, you're virtue signaling in a sense. You're being like, yeah, look at me, like, care about your friends, but then you never do.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's very interesting that I did want to go back to something that you said with earlier about like how many people have never asked themselves like where they're going or what they're doing. I think it's like very strange that it's considered like a stoner thought to be like, what's the meaning of life?
Yes.
Like that thought, most people think is silly. Like the question, they're like, why are you even thinking about that? Like, just go to work. And it's like, wait, shouldn't that be like the fundamental question that we figure out for ourselves? Is like, what is the meaning of all this?
Yeah.
Like, that should be the only fucking focus for like each individual, being like, what's the meaning of your life? Like, what's going to, not even necessarily just, do you want this house 40 years from now, but like fundamentally, what is going to make your life a success? And it's not going to be money. No. It's not going to be any of those things. So like, find out what it is. Like, we all have to. Like, in that aspect where, nobody thinks about it and nobody talks about it. People get uncomfortable when you bring it up. And I think I've started to realize why is because to even consider that there might be another way to live life, you have to first admit that the way that you're doing it might be wrong. And like, nobody wants to have that thought and like be like, oh shit, okay, I might not be taking the right steps. I might, or even just the whole concept in general might not be right. Like, even say the Western world, like the way that we go about life, this consumerism mentality is like, this might not be right, and nobody wants to even have that thought, so that you can't even have that conversation without that precursor thought.
If you have that thought, you consider an outcast. And it's funny when you structure things. If you look at the way school is structured, for instance, right? They structure you to be basically a drone.
Yeah.
You go to school, you go to school, you start working, you have a 15-minute recess, you come back in, you have a half an hour lunch, you come back in, you have a 15-minute recess, and then you keep going, right? That's basically work. You're basically just outlining what it is to be in a job.
You just set me up. Do you know the history of public school?
No, I didn't know.
Oh, dude. Okay, I'm gonna go off on a tangent. Okay, so public school was designed off of North America's, the compulsory schooling system of the world.
Yeah.
A greater sense was designed by, or based off of Prussia, which was a military state in nowadays Germany, and back in the 1700s. in 1830s, a guy named Horace Mann from America went to Prussia to look at their factory-style schooling because they were very much interested in spitting out soldiers in Prussia. So their school system was literally just to train soldiers. Like parents had to pay extra for things like mathematics and all that. So Horace Mann went over to Prussia, got a look at it firsthand, immediately came back to America. He said he campaigned on saying that compulsory schooling was the only way to turn America's citizenry into rule and law-abiding citizens and essentially create a hive. And he then became the board, the education board leader for Massachusetts. He enacted it by 1850, based like entirely off of Prussia's factory schooling model. And then by 1900, the rest of the world had adopted it. And the people that funded it and to get off the ground in America was John Rockefeller, who has brought it nationally. And I mean, this is a very it's not even like, I mean, it's well documented. It's not even just a theory. So like their first paper ever released by the General Education Board, the first line by it is, it says, in our dreams, the masses will form to our molding hands. That's like the first line from their press release, essentially, for schooling in the 1850s. Or sorry, no, that paper came in 1900. But it did make sense, and it served a purpose at one time. Like during that time, the Western world was becoming industrialized. The only jobs for people in cities were factories. So like it did, as much as it was a create workers scenario, and these businessmen like Rockefeller just wanted to create factory workers and essentially a worker army for himself, it had a purpose at one point. Like 50% of the job market at that time was in mining or in factory work of some sort. And it's like nowadays that's 9% of our workforce. But like our whole school system is still set up to just breed factory workers. And like not intellectuals, not thinkers, not creative people, and that's fine at that time. But like now you look at today and you're like, there's no use for that model. There's zero use for that. I mean, homeschooled kids are shown to be 5 to 10 years in advance of their school peers. Everybody thinks that school is necessary to teach us reading, writing, and math, and it's like the literacy rate actually dropped when it was first enacted in Massachusetts. So in the 1850s, it was somewhere around 98% literacy rate, and then it dropped steadily for like 2% for every decade after that. And like, I mean, look at the average kid these days. Like, they can't do a fucking 2 + 2 with an iPhone calculator.
They can't handwrite anymore. Handwriting is gone out the window.
You can't write. Like, so like this whole system is built is archaic.
Yeah.
And it just kills. I think it kills. It's funny, you go there to learn, but I think it kills our interest in learning, because by the time, I know I was, like, dude, I was so checked out in school.
Yeah.
I never paid attention at all. And I still did well, but like, I didn't I remember I studied for one exam.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't care less, because the way in which they teach you things is so dull, so it's lifeless. Like, and it sucks to say, but yeah, all school teaches you to do is get into a 9-to-5 rhythm.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And how to essentially take orders.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it's perpetuated through everything we do. It's funny because I watched an interview with J. Cole, and it was the same. This profoundly switched the way I thought. But he said something in that interview. He's like, he said a lot of great things. This interview's really old. It was 2014 before it still came out. He said, an hour of my life is worth $14, even if the hourly rate increases. And say it's $20 an hour. You're saying an hour of my life is worth $20 an hour. You got 24 hours in a day. You sleep 8. You go to work for 8. And the rest of the time you just have to try and squish and hang out with friends, family, cooking, any other vocation you want to take up. The structure is just all bad. It doesn't make any sense. And the fact that they don't, well, now it's a little more, it's become I can't even say that. It's not really changed. It's sort of changing because there's younger teachers, and they're trying to switch up the curriculum a lot. But even with that being said, it's like, it's still the same model from before.
Mm-hmm.
And you're basically just an automaton looking to become a drone,
Yeah.
to be a worker bee. And the funny thing about it is that those jobs are now gone. Either they're being, exported overseas, or they're being eliminated altogether for machinery that's more efficient. And in time, I mean, I worked at Blockbuster for years. I worked at Blockbuster for 9 years. At that point in my life, that was my longest tenure job.
Yeah.
And even that now, I saw the whole transition from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray to Blockbuster's out of business to now we're streaming. It's complete. Everything else in life has changed. However, our school system has remained the same. And I feel like that's also a way that why we're so. It's not politically incorrect to say this, but we're stunted or retarded in our development, because we're not being challenged.
Well, even think about, like, what's the last thing that's going to be that we'll have to offer the world is creativity. Like what you're saying about with everything becoming automated jobs wise, it's like creativity is going to be the last human frontier for what we actually have to offer to the world. Everything else is gonna, robots will do our jobs better than us, 110%.
It's kind
of, fuck, Boston Dynamics, man.
What's Boston Dynamics?
You haven't seen Boston Dynamics?
No.
Oh shit. Okay, so Boston Dynamics is making these fucked robots. Like, so they can take
the dogs with the one eye.
Yeah. Okay. So you've seen their videos.
That's
So that's the
creepy.
company. Yeah. So Boston Dynamics is that company that's making all that stuff, and like even just the workers, like they'll take these worker robots that look exactly like fucking humans, and then they can pick up a box, and that box has like a QR code or a barcode on it, like everywhere, and then that box will say where its assignment is, that QR code will like say where it needs to get unloaded to on a shelf or something like this, and like that robot literally just goes. That thing doesn't need to take piss breaks. Like that thing's Jeff Bezos' best friend.
Yeah.
Like all Amazon workers are just going to be cut off the second that becomes affordable for a business, and that's it's going to fuck trucking. It's going to fuck warehouse workers, like
grocery store clerks,
all of that stuff. Which is also kind of crazy because it's like that great Bill Burr skit where he's talking about how he's like, has nobody just realized that you can just roll hams out the front door now? He's like, I'm not self-checking. You want me to like make sure I pay for my stuff? He's like, nah, I'm gonna be tossing
take shit out
to my friends and I'm like, it is, but everything's going that right.
So what are your thoughts on that? Like big business becoming entities now. They're almost being considered humans.
Yeah.
And
look at Facebook. Like, Facebook's as powerful as any country in this world. Like, and Google, like, those two companies on their own, like, even split from each other. Like, both of them they have higher fucking incomes than most nations. And it's really crazy. It's wild to see the power that these companies have and the influence that they have with world economy
and how they're able to circumvent laws. And bring bills into passing. It's actually quite scary. It's very alarming, man. I know we've talked about it in private before. It's like, well, what do? Do we just move into the wilderness?
So you become. That's where like you have to learn how to become. Going back to like the conversation before, but like you have to become self-sufficient. Like to these companies and to these big corporations, and like that's the way we're going. Like even like mom and pop shops or like of any kind, retail stores, restaurants, all that. It's gonna really be hard for them to keep things going. And with the more efficient these businesses come, like why would you shop anywhere else when you can just order something online and it shows up to your door within 24 hours? You don't even have to walk out your front door. Like why wouldn't you? Right? So it's only going to become harder on them, and that's where like I look at it and I go like, you can't put all your eggs into their baskets, because the second that there's a machine that does your job better than you, like they're not going to worry about. I mean, dude, even the fact that like all of the Western countries' pension plans are said to fail within the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Like I mean, like that's fucked. Like, so, okay, the government isn't even going to, like, our pensions, all of this kind of stuff. Like, we can't even rely on that for our generation. It's like, you have to become self-sufficient.
Yeah.
That's the only way. So with all these businesses and the automation of everything, it's truly scary. And going back to the school thing, it's like, you have to learn how to be creative. And I feel like especially with parents, like, fostering their kids, I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody how to raise their kids. I'm hardly doing a good job of taking care of myself. But it's just like in 20, 30 years, creativity is going to be the only thing left we have to offer.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not really doing anything to make sure kids are more creative.
And who knows if that's going to be useful later on. That's the biggest thing. Have you seen, by any chance, the Michael Moore documentary, Where to Invade Next?
No.
I think you should check it out. I think you might like it, but he kind of
he's missed the mark for me a few times. In the last couple of years,
his things are his documentaries are very skewed based on where his viewpoint is. But I feel all documentaries are skewed. But he doesn't really give you a bipartisan, if that's even the word, full embodiment of what you're looking at. But this whole premise of the movie is that he wants to take the practices that America holds true, and he goes to different countries in Europe and he tries to institute it, or like see how they're taking advantage of it. And in most cases, foreign countries are living the American dream far better than Americans. In France, he went there and the kids were eating 5-star meals for lunch. They gave a kid a Coke. They didn't even know what Coke was. They didn't they don't drink that.
Yeah.
Or like Finland, the schooling in Finland, it was crazy. It's like it went from like the bottom 3 of teaching to the top, and it's all they eliminated homework, and they only have in classes like 3 hours, and then it's just their nature. And if they have questions, they ask, and that's kind of how even myself how I learned, because I understood in school that things were very easy for me. It wasn't a savant by any means, but like I grasped things very, very fast. But I didn't want to study. You write an essay. Why the fuck am I writing 5 pages on something I don't even care about? But then when I went to film school, I was in varying ages of the people I was in school with. And I was probably the third youngest in a class of 14, and people from varied backgrounds: marketing specialists, a guy who owned his own boat, and this kind of rich dude lived in Europe, and like a witch. I live with. There's so many different people. A witch, like she was actually a practicing witch. There's so many different people I went to school with, and I learned a lot. And I learned a lot by being inquisitive and asking questions and learning about experiences. And a big part of like Jamaican culture is like we hold elderly people. We hold them up, right? A lot of European countries are like this too, where I feel in North America, they just kind of like you reach a certain age, we're too busy to take care of you, put you in a nursing home or retirement community, right? Whereas a lot of elderly people, they find in communities where they're still lively and moving around, is that they're integrated and they're still useful, and they feel useful. And I feel it sucks all the energy out of a person when they're no longer valued as being a useful commodity or person.
When you just look at his dead weight.
Yes. Yeah. So when you stick somebody in basically a prison, retirement community is basically a prison. Like it might be functional, they might have a good time.
Yeah.
But I mean, nobody wants to be hampered or confined. They want to have complete autonomy of what they're doing, right? So by not having kids with grandparents, like I learned a lot from my grandparents. I lived with both my grandfather and my grandmother, and I also was alive to have both my great grandfather and great grandmother around. I saw them every weekend. We were there every Sunday, and I mean, I was a kid, so I just wanted to play. But when you look at things they told you later on in life, same thing with my dad. I look at things that he told me early on in life that I'm just like, man, you're talking too much. I just want to go play with my friends, man. Like, what do you mean I have to come in the streetlights? Come on. And what do you mean I'm a prince and I have my crown, I wear my crown and all this stuff? Like, you're talking complete cuckoo foolishness to me. That I grew up and I'm like, oh shit, he was just trying to like instill in me pride in myself and self-belief. And my grandparents, the same thing. Like, my mom would always say it too. My mom and my grandmother both would always say, I asked them a question, you know, where's Egypt? I don't know, look it up. But I'm like, you know the answer. Just tell me the answer. They're like, no, look for it. And when you actually do that work in order to delve in and find something, and it obviously sticks, it's more meat on the bones type of thing. It sticks more in your memory as opposed to being told information. And with these...
So interesting thing on that.
Yeah.
Our minds actually have like a holding zone. And it's pivotal because you don't want to remember every single piece of information. Like, I don't, you know, why would I don't want to walk out here and have my brain filled with, all right, the carpet was green, that speaker was to my left. Like, we purposely forget certain things, and what your brain does is it takes information, puts it in this holding zone. A good analogy I've heard before is like a whiteboard that has in what the information that you write down on it, it disappears over time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you have to use that information before it disappears, before you actually learn said piece of information. So it's like, as far as just being told something, it's like, yeah, that goes up on the whiteboard for all of 2 or 3 hours, and then it's gone. But that aspect of actually learning it, whether you write about it or, I mean, that's been huge for me. It's like the writing aspect as far as like memorizing. Like, we've all had it when you feel confident talking about a subject, or like a subject comes up and you're like, oh fuck yes, I'm confident. And then as you're starting to talk, I mean, there's already been like 2 or 3 times this podcast that's happened where it's like you're in the middle of it and you're like, this was making more sense in my head. Like I'm struggling to find the words, and it's like that's where that whole whiteboard situation comes in, is that we haven't used that information, we haven't actually learned it. Like we don't just being told something. I mean, that's, people say like, oh, I learn by doing things, and it's like that's everybody.
Yeah.
Like everybody learns by doing it. You have to use that information.
Yeah.
But so that's really cool that like you had people instilling that in you.
You don't ever think about it. That's the funny thing about it, and I think we suffer for it now because we have so many devices that take in that everything's so instant, right? I remember when I first did the isolation tank, and to be in the isolation tank for an hour with my thoughts, just to sit there and think about nothing was like so difficult. It's not the first time. The first time I did it easily. The second time was so hard.
Yeah.
But when I came out of it the first time, I remember I came out and I actually felt like it was the Matrix. I felt like I saw the code everywhere. You know, I was like, can I fly now?
Dude, I really want to do flow tank. I've over the last year and a half or 2 years or so, I've gotten huge into meditation, mindfulness, all of that. Like, it's so funny, like going back to thinking of younger self, like I would have scoffed, laughed at all that shit, and like that's fucking silly. Don't talk to me about breathing. Don't talk to me about like meditating. That's all nonsense. It's so key. And so our minds, I mean our attention everybody's got, sputters. Like nobody can really actually hone in their attention at 100% on something. Like we have to be concerned about our surroundings. Is there danger around that corner? Like, so every creak, it's like that grabs your attention for a second, it pulls it away. But that mindfulness of understanding when your attention gets pulled away. Not a lot of people have that, and that's pretty crazy that a lot of people can be sitting at a desk, working at something, and not even be mentally in that space, but also unaware that they are not in that space. And that's where like mindfulness has been so key for me, and that's why I want to try the float tanks. Is just understanding when I'm not 100% into something, when my attention's divided, and like there's actually a reward system for that. The reason being is like why we get bored is like it's our mind telling us that there isn't a carrot at the end of that. Like, there isn't. You're not going to get anything from this. So it's supposed to like boredom or attention being spurred is supposed to be a symbol to like, hey, put your attention elsewhere.
Yeah.
But when those times come when you're like, no, I need to be focused. Like, yeah, I don't know how people. I mean, I know how people don't meditate because like nobody talks about it. It's never it's never been a. When was the last time you went to your doctor and like, dude, like the amount of kids that have been diagnosed with ADHD is. I have not heard a single psychiatrist or psychologist be like, yeah, no, it's definitely as bad as it seems. They're all like, no, it's way overdiagnosed. And like, yes, you have to teach kids how to be mindful. You have to teach kids how to pay attention, like learn, find interest in learning things, all of that. Like it's the fact that we don't instill any of that. And instead, we give them devices so that they don't bother us, ignore us, and then it only makes that worse.
Yeah. The pills too, man. There's a miniseries right now called Dope Sick.
Okay.
With Michael Keaton, and it talks about how the opioid, what they call it a crisis.
Yeah.
But how that began, and it's fascinating. It's also very disturbing.
Another good one for that is Prescription Thugs.
Yeah.
That's another really good one. It's talking more about the painkiller side than the ADHD side, but yeah, just about how there's so much money in prescriptions.
The whole reward system is very interesting to me because now, like I play Scrabble every day, like on my phone.
Yeah.
There's no particular reward system. I know for a fact that it will help me with Alzheimer's, which has run in my family.
You hit a triple ward score, that's a fucking reward. Like, you're getting
I'm juiced?
Yeah.
100 points. But yeah, it's one of those things. I remember, do you remember Stumble Upon?
No.
Okay, so Stumble Upon was a website. It was, you can link it as a toolbar right under where your web location, your web address is. And it's a button, and you press Stumble. You put all your interest in when you first sign up. And you press Stumble, and it'll randomly transport you to any kind of website that has something to do with any one of the interests you mentioned before. So I
was gonna say that's real dangerous.
Oh my god! There was one that talked about, it showed you a map of the world, and it had a counter on it, a birth counter and a death counter, and it just kept on lighting up and diminishing. And it shows you all over the world where people are dying and being born.
Fuck, that's
crazy shit ever. But I would do the most fucking crazy shit back in the day. Like I tried to become lucid in my dreams.
Okay, yeah.
And then I tried different types of sleep patterns in order to maximize the most efficiency in my day. There's so many of these little things. My friend became a Buddhist.
Dude, so dreaming. Why did you want to get into lucid dreaming?
So for the whole aspect, so I read a lot of philosophy books in my spare time, or I used to anyways. But the biggest thing for me, my whole thought process is like, why are things the way things are? So whenever I had these questions, this is even before I started smoking, I'm just like, well, how do I get to that? Like, how do I get to the root of this? And I'm like, when people say deja vu, I link deja vu to sleep. It's like, okay, well, maybe I dreamed that.
Yeah.
Maybe we're connecting with each other in our dreams. You know, when people come in, our friend came in earlier and said he knew my other friend, right? Like, they know each other because they've seen each other, but there's sometimes you meet people that there's no way you could have met before, but they're so familiar to you. And why is that? Is there like another plane where you're able to I find like, this is gonna sound so stoner, I'm gonna dive deeper into this. There's so much in this universe to think that like the things that we know in our known world are just it can't be right. No. You know what I mean? So if that was all these things I tried to do, I mean, all this stuff is stemmed from the Matrix. The Matrix is like, was it for me. Yeah. It was just like, it was the movie that broke my brain. It should be it for everybody. Yeah. That and like Into the Wild. There's a lot of movies I love. Into the Wild was another one. It's like completely broke my brain because I never thought and looked at life like this. It wasn't something that my dad would be much happier if I was early on, if I was a doctor or, foreign families, they want you to be something of high prestige, doctor, lawyer, whatever. Then later on, it's like, no, go own your own franchise. And I'm like, I don't want to work at Subway the rest of my life, right? So everything I did was all about self-discovery, whereas back in my dad's time, it's all about academic achievement.
Yeah.
So scholastically, he'd want to be at the top tier all the time. For me, that was never my one and true vision or avenue for creating success within my life. If I attained all this money, when I was young, I wanted to be on Wall Street. That was my goal as a 7-year-old. I wanted to be a Wall Street. I used to call it typhoon. Yeah. And I didn't even know the word tycoon. His parents probably. I don't know why. I must have seen like Wall Street when I was a kid in the movie, Gordon Gekko or something. I don't know. But that was my goal. It was my dream. I didn't understand why. And as I got older, and going to BC was the biggest thing. So I left for myself. My best friend left a year before me, and another one of our friends left a couple of months before I got there. But to be on your own with creative people, in a house that's full of creatives, where you can just sit there and think and ponder things. And this is like far before we all smoke weed now. Yeah, but this is before that was even going on. And we were still looking for that enlightenment within ourselves. Every Friday we finish school, we finish scripts, we do like a script study and workshopping on the Friday, and then I worked at Cactus Club when I was there. I have the Fridays off, or I have to work later on. And we all go to a movie, and then we go eat at White Castle. And we just talk and like throw ideas at each other. And these are people from varying ages and life backgrounds, and you just like, you start hearing about different people's stories, and you're like, okay, well, that's fucking interesting. I want to look into that. That should be learning. That should be what learning is really about. But going back, tying into the sleep and everything, I was like, I wanted to reach my zenith. Yeah. That was my goal. I wanted to attain nirvana through some kind of esoteric something, just to get to the point where I was complete. At that point in my life, I was extremely confident. Like nothing could break my confidence. Not a negative person. People saw me, see me writing or reading a book at a bar or at a cafe, and they come and talk to you. And like, that would never happen before. It was very open. And before that, very timid. And now I look at my life now, I'm becoming not self-aware, self-conscious of how people view me. And that was never my thing before. It's like, even posting things on Instagram and this whole like Black Lives Matter and all these LGBTQ Lives Matter, all these different things are going, you post things up and people hit you with hate, or people are like, you get these like dopamine hits, and you're like, shit. Like after a while, I'm like, man, like I'm arguing with a lot of people, and like, should I just not say anything anymore? It's like you have these internal conversations with yourself, and then you start to think like, fuck, well, who am I? Where do I stand? Like, because there's people I've known my entire life. I've known people since I was like 9 years old, and their way of thinking is completely different from mine, and I'm like, boy, the whole time we grew up together, like this same street, we all grew up together, like hung out all the time, and like to see now how like their life has transitioned to this point, and wherever their interests lie, or like whatever helps benefit them, is kind of tailored to where their ideological views go to, right? And I mean, the same happens for me as well, but I just don't look at it like that. I try to not only think about myself, but think about everyone else. I know I'm kind of harping back to what I've said previously, but it's always been, I don't think we can get anywhere in life unless we go together. Yeah. And all this argument and shit, like, it's for the birds, man. I don't do it. Like, I'm not entertaining any foolishness. And I'm coming back to that point where I was supremely confident. And I kind of have to work through all this. I have to chip away at all this shit that I've now learned or stuck on to me now. And I've carried on me like a backpack of like, when they say you get out of a relationship, you have all of your baggage, and you just bring it to the next relationship. Like, here, take this, hold this for a second. I'm just gonna come sit up in here. It's kind of like that, man. It's like I'm trying to get rid of baggage, just like throwing it on the ground as I'm walking. Like, like Shawshank Redemption, just like putting the stones in the ground as I walk, just chipping away.
Most people don't even know they're carrying baggage, though. Like,
yeah,
that's the thing. Is the whole self-awareness, self-knowledge, all that. That's like the cornerstone, self-evaluation, cornerstone of every philosophy, and that's probably why you've had that mindset. Is you said you liked reading philosophy a lot, and it's like that's the cornerstone of every philosophy. I mean, obviously certain philosophies have different virtues or different cultures have different kind of goals with their philosophies, but it's like at the root of it is all self-knowledge, self-power.
Yeah.
I think that's the whole reason for life, and is to discover yourself or even create yourself the way that you want. And what you're talking about, the self-conscious thing, it's funny. The more self-aware I get, the harder I am on myself. But I'm not self-conscious so much as what will other people think about me, but like what will I think about myself in 5 years?
Yeah.
And that starts fucking with me a bit. Like, am I gonna hate everything I'm doing right now 5 years from now? Because I know I look back on me 5 years ago and I'm like, fuck that dude. It fucking sucks. Like I wouldn't even. If you put me in a room with myself from 5 years ago today, I would have nothing of interest to talk to him about.
Yeah.
And it's like, so that's where I kind of get in my own head, is to be like, oh, 5 years from now, fuck, like,
yeah.
that's
well,
where I
like,
get
looking at this person.
That's what do you think? What do you think that is making bring that on now?
What the feelings of
Just being like
self-conscious?
Yeah.
I kind of think it's the way we've had a paradigm shift in the way people's thought process works now.
Mm-hmm.
This whole like outrage culture, where people are not even looking at the medium that they're upset about. They haven't even watched or read or seen anything. They just see a salacious headline and they stick a viewpoint to it or an emotional feeling to it.
I don't even think it's that. I think they're just ideologically possessed, and they're just like in this. Literally though, like they're just in this group where it's just like I'm literally just moving with the group on any side of it, like no matter, and it's just this tribalism, this like need to fit in, need to feel safe in numbers. Like I mean, so when we evolved, like we evolved to blend in with the masses because predators hunt individuals that stray from the pack, not a whole pack. The straggler, the social outcast, anything. That's who they hunt. So it's like we evolved to want to be in these groups, and it's like just like we want to not dress a little too weird. Like, you know, we don't want to,
stick out too much.
Yeah, we don't want to stick out too much, and it's like that carries into that realm of this politics thing, where you can see very clearly there's been two teams being drawn, and they're like, pick one, and like you have to belong to one of these teams, and that's where like people pick a team, and then they're like, this is it, and it's like I don't even think it's anymore as far as them reading, coming with their own opinions on a headline and like a short-sighted opinion. They're just being told how to feel about something.
Yeah.
Because the amount of people I see talking online about situations that they couldn't then get into, like if you sat down and had a like even for instance climate change, like how many people talk about climate change online, but if you actually sat in a room with them for 5 minutes, they couldn't tell you where the problem is, where the solution is. Actually, I heard a funny thing the other day where they're like, you take any person and sit them down and say, could you run a nuclear power plant? Like nobody in their right mind is going to say, yes, I'm qualified for that. But everybody thinks that they are qualified to say how the world power grid should work.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, so it's these ideas where like they're not actually thought through. They're just like, this is the emotion we're attaching to this issue. Therefore, this is the emotion you should convey. And it's just like nobody's actually thinking about these things.
But what causes these thoughts? Like, is it just gang mentality? Like you've heard like gang mentality, where people like mob mentality. That's it. Where people is like lose their mind for half a second and just beat the fuck out of somebody, and they're like, well, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, you just get into these groups and you start thinking these things. Even to look at like the two different groups, you know, when I was young, I loved Star Wars. Star Wars is my shit. But I never liked the Jedi. Like, I never liked the Sith. I was always in the middle. I'm like, I used to call myself Xavier Windu. I was like, I'm the great Jedi. I'm the one in the middle. I'm the one that's got all the logic, you know? Like, certain things I'm going to need a little bit of darkness for. Certain things I'm going to need a little bit of light for. But in the end, I'm equilibrium.
That's the whole thing about those movies, though, is the balance, the power balance.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. There's so much to learn from those movies in the way. Like, have you seen Dune yet, actually?
I haven't seen Dune. I want to read the book. There's a girl I used to watch frequently on YouTube called Comic Book Girl 19.
Yeah.
Really dope girl. She's like ultimately confident. She got a freaking mohawk. It's purple. She loves Dune. She has book clubs. She talks about all these different Marvel movies. She loves Marvel. Huge X-Men fan. And she really got me thinking about Dune. I looked at the book and I'm like, fuck this is so big. But now I'm like, fuck, maybe I should get into that, because now the movie's out and I'm like, oh man, I really wanted. I usually don't do this. I usually watch the movie first,
yeah,
and then read the book after. But for this one, I want to actually read the book before I actually go in.
Yeah.
For me, it's always been movie first, book next.
Okay.
That's kind of how I came into.
I feel like you're always disappointed when you do it the other way. If you do book then movie, you're always just like, fuck it.
Most people say that. Like they read the book and then they see the movie, they're like, oh, this movie shit. It's not like the book. Well, it's never gonna be that. So for me, when I do the opposite, I watch the movie and then I read the book after. I'm like, shit. Like, they give me some extra stuff here.
Yes.
You know, like it's like, okay, but most people's viewpoint is like, oh, I picture the characters that they picked in this movie, which is not the same thing. Big, for instance, is like the whole. When the girls were all in heat over that 50 Shades of fake sex.
Dude, I picked up one of those, not 50 Shades of Grey, but I picked up one of those books recently just to be like, all right, let me see what these chicks are reading. That shit is like, I started laughing because I was like, where I was living before just moving to Toronto here, my roommate's friend, she reads all those books and she like crushes them, and like we would be like sitting there on a Saturday night like watching like the sports game or like UFC or whatever, and like she'd often like if something was happening boring, she just goes into her books, and then like I picked up one of those books and started reading it, and I was like, this is just like a porn transcript, like this is straight, and I was like, I thought about it and I was like, it's funny because it's acceptable if you read it. But if I just sat here on my phone and was like, I'm fucking bored, I'm just gonna watch some porn. I'm like, there's no way you're reading this and not getting turned on.
Yeah.
Like, I was reading it and I was like, I might go watch some porn. but like, yeah, I was like, those books are wild. Sorry, I had to
No, I definitely.
I just learned how crazy those books are.
So think of this. That summer, I made the most amount as a server that summer. Magic Mike came out. And 50 Shades of Grey, the books came out the same summer. And I was working as a server, and we had tight shirts. My shirt says, my other shirt's no shirt. Bro, we were getting tipped left, right, and center. Like, people were just like, women coming in heat, man. I'm like, holy fuck, it's crazy out here, man. But that's funny how that's acceptable, but pornography is nice. I once dated a girl who said, if she ever found out I watched porn, she'd break up with me. That's a real conversation. I have friends now that they dated a girl for 3 years, and she didn't know that he went to the strip club, he watched porn all the time, and she would definitely have broken up with him. And it's like,
I quit porn.
Yeah,
I was like
you have to.
Quite a while ago. It's been a long time actually now.
It's not.
Yeah, it's like I joke about like being like, I'm gonna go watch porn, but like once you learn what porn and all that does to your mind, you're like, oh fuck. You're like, it turns us into like sexual sociopaths. Mm-hmm. Like, it's very weird. And I mean, even online dating, like even like a chill version, I mean, it's completely different, but it does the exact same thing. And it's like really weird to me. All of that, like online dating, done. Like, no, none of that anymore.
It's not real.
No,
it's not real. Like the scenarios you find in porn, or even in online. I talked to one of my people on my floor recently. She's looking to find a man. She wants to be with a dude, right? And I'm like, well, I'll tell you right now, the apps aren't going to be it. Like, because you're basically seeing the best aspects of that person. Best pictures, best qualities, best scenarios they've been in before, like all these different things that just pertain to their best self. You're not getting a true embodiment of what this person is. And furthermore, it takes away all of the nervous energy you have in meeting somebody. You know, even when you like, my girlfriend, I'm familiar with before dating her, right? But that point in our relationship, when I was getting to know her to start dating her, extremely nerve-wracking for me. And before, I could talk to her about anything, but you need that in order to say, like, think of when you meet a complete stranger. You're like, you just go up to them and talk to them. Can we go for a coffee? Or you want to have a coffee? Or you make a joke about something they're reading or whatever the case is. That whole intermediary process has to be done in order to, it's almost like the dangling of the carrot. You've achieved nothing when you just swipe, link. You like me, I like you, cool, let's go out. It's like, okay, so now the nerves and all that shit is out the window.
So you know,
the building is gone.
Crazy that I learned about online dating platforms as well. They do a thing called seeding, where they make fake profiles, so that like when a dude first joins Tinder or Bumble, I don't know for sure exactly which ones are doing this, but there's a guy named Rob Henderson from Oxford who did a bunch of research on this, and he left it as an anonymous CEO of one of these platforms because it was the guy asked him not to release his name, but he admitted to the fact that they seed profiles, and they'll make fake profiles, and when you first join that platform, you'll get all these matches, and they actually like autobot. That's when you get like the hey, what's up, but you never hear back from them. Fake profiles.
I did not know that.
Those are fake profiles designed you to be like, oh fuck, I'm onto something. I'm gonna clean up on this thing.
Yeah.
And that's how they get you addicted to it.
That's
like,
insane.
Isn't that wild?
I didn't think it was that so insidious.
Yeah, they're straight up being like, fucking.
That's fucked up, man. Because that also is obviously going to program you to keep on doing it, right? You become a serial. You know what? A lot of the things I learned. I'm kind of lucky because I was born in '82, so I got to see so much. So much has changed in the 3 decades I've been alive. Almost 4 decades I've been alive, and now just to like see how the whole dating scene is evolved. Like for me, Sex and the City was like monumental, transformational in the way I even spoke to women. How the way I even define the softer side of myself I was able to find that in these TV shows that I could probably quote this TV show. I watch it so often, right? Those are things that I used to get made fun of at Blockbuster for renting those. Then I put the people that were making fun of me, I'm like, watch it and tell me it's different, that you feel differently about this. So you watch Clerks or any of these movies where these video, or you don't watch Justice Creek, but the guys that are in the video store, you know the trope of the video store guys talking about different movies or talking about situations. I'll be like, oh, take it home, watch the first season, and come talk to me. And this guy's one of my mentors. He's the one that got me to start looking at the Hagakure. Hagakure has like become like what it has become my embodiment, like basically my Bible on how to live your life as a good person. And it's just
Hagakure?
Hagakure. It's the philosophy. It's a book of the samurai.
I'll have to get you to send me some book recommendations.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got a long list right now, but I do want to talk some more on that.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's it just delves into the way it's structured, and you can open any page, and there's a lesson on every page.
Oh, sick.
If you ever want to watch a movie to see where it is in practice, Ghost Dog with Forrest Whitaker is probably the best thing. Last Samurai, not so much. But that whole process, they come back to me now after watching the show now, and they're like, "Yo, you're right, man." I'm like, of course I was right. You think I'm just out here just watching these women gallivant all over the place and have sex and try to find love, man? This is truthful shit. This is like the other perspective. This is the other side of the coin, and it's always been a principle. In order to like catch your enemy, you have to think like your enemy. And I know women are the enemy, but like when you're thinking these things, you're able to now find a common place. Whereas most people don't think like that. They think how their archetypes are supposed to think, right? And that's the cheat code when you're able to do things like that in order to find what you're trying to get to. Like even movies like Hitch, or like these kind of things that like teach you what it's like to be a good partner, not just a lover or.
Well, it's really weird. It's funny because like whenever I was growing up, do you remember like all the dating advice growing up? Like was very manipulative. Like yeah, it was like a hunt. Like that's how they like keys to the yeah. Like literally, that's what the thing was. It's like everything was about like manipulating. I've never watched Sex and the City, so I can't speak to that. But it's like you look at now, like even Mark Manson's first book. I haven't read it, but I was listening to him talk about it and why he thought his first book was so successful because it was like a dating advice book for men. But he was like, it was the first book that like dating advice that wasn't meant to manipulate, turn yourself against somebody, essentially like use them. And he's like, get them through honesty, like you're being yourself, all that shit. And it's like, that stuff is what actually works.
It is.
Like it's kind of crazy because I've definitely never even been like a ladies' man by any stretch of the imagination. And I always thought music it wasn't used for that, but I was like, if I ever turn into a ladies' man, it's gonna become because of music. Dude, as soon as you just start talking about your emotions online, like that,
bro, absolutely,
those are the new rock stars.
Yeah, man. It's the truth, man. I remember after watching the Sex and the City thing, I went through like a deep dive wormhole. I had the whole the transcript manifest for the Pickup Artist. I'd read The Game by Neil Strauss, and it didn't mesh well with obviously Sex and the City and The Game are two different things. One's talking about negging and peacocking and all these different aspects in order trickery, using magic tricks to get girls and all this shit. It's like, dude, like it shouldn't be this difficult.
Yeah, you should have to go to a magic trick to get a girl's attention.
But the same type of thing. It's like when you understand the rules of the Matrix, you're able now to bend and weave your way around and understand the code. So like,
it is all of those things though. When you start like hacking those codes, because you can learn it, and like even when it's kind of weird once you start reading psychology books, like you start to be like, oh fuck, I could really weaponize this against people. I mean, that's essentially marketing. Like that's all marketing does.
Let me tell you a story after that.
But like, you start reading that stuff and you're like, oh fuck, like this could be even the dating stuff or the peacocking or the nagging or all that. It's just like, it's hard because I feel like it's all short term. It's all short term benefit. So like, in nothing that like when you focus only on short term benefit, like all of that, like if you're building a relationship upon lies, it's not going to have a long hold.
No.
Or even friendships, businesses, any of that. Like if you're looking to use and hot people or stepping stone, any sort of thing where you're just looking for that quick advancement, that it turns out to be very, very bad.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. One of my friends, the story I was going to tell you, he found out that I had this whole, like, when I said I had tons of documents, I had probably like close to 1,000 pages. It was in a file that I downloaded on LimeWire. But it had everything. It had like every type of thing you can think of that deals with the interaction between men and women. And I told him I had one of my friends, and he's a single guy. He was living out west at the time. And he's like, "Yo, Q, give me that, man. Let me have that." I'm like, "Are you gonna use it for good, or are you gonna use it for evil?" His response was not good enough for me to actually give him all this byproducts. You can actually fuck somebody's life up with that. Because the whole thing with baggage is like, I never want someone to feel the shitty way I felt before. And if you're just gonna use people in order to get the shit you want, it's like, okay, well, there's gonna be something that's gonna affect that later on with other people.
Yeah.
Most people don't care about the other people. It's like, fuck them. I'm here right now. Let me get what I want to get.
Yeah.
You know, but that's like
That's-
I said. Like
that-
you said, it's
that-
all up front.
That logic, though, of the short-term gains and like short-term personal gain is like hallmark of a psychopath. Like when you're not thinking about the long-term consequences for using or manipulating people or any of that kind of stuff. It's like that's the hallmark of. I mean, you're not either just not psychopathic or psychopathic. It's a spectrum, but like, yeah, it's. I mean, when you participate in that behavior, so you're tilting that arrow that way.
It's breadcrumbs. It's like if you think to yourself, well, if I'm getting away with it, it's like a thief. You know,
Yeah.
like you steal one thing, you get away with it. Let me steal again.
Yeah.
Maybe next thing you know, you're a klepto. It's like this shit.
Yeah,
happens.
everything is a snowball, especially with habits, like with or like how we carry ourselves. Like it's all snowball. I mean, we're 95%. Our mind operates 95% subconsciously. So it's like whatever you however you program your subconscious, like in that manipulative way or whatever, any of that kind of stuff. It's like that's how you're going to continue acting from now on.
Yeah.
And it's like it's very hard to break those patterns once you start them.
Wait, going back to porn, that's one of the biggest things too, man, because that shit can become an addiction. It's like I know friends who have been addicted to porn. You know, it's like the thing about it, like you said, is like it's not real life. The one of the best things I can remember experiencing from working at the bank is end of the month when elderly people come in, and unfortunately business owners came as well, and they're very cranky, just want to make their deposit and go back to business. But I would like to sit there and talk to old people and find out the number one thing I asked them was, aren't you bored? Because you're retired, you're not doing anything. Like, no, we travel, we go on cruises, they do bingo night, they do all this fun shit together, right? Like, that was one of the biggest things I wanted to know, and it led me to my next question, like, how do you stay in love? Like, how does this perpetuate to this? Like, teach me how you attain that. Completely different time. They didn't have as much, sensory, all these other different sensory things clouding you. But those questions I would ask to almost every elderly person. Even now, I love elderly people for that very reason. So they have such a wealth of knowledge that you don't have untethered information like that within a person. You'd have to go research that, and like people don't even know what books are nowadays. You know, like so it's very. I don't think that the starting process getting into something is as important as perpetuating and keeping it, because continuity is basically the thing that keeps everything going. And one of the biggest flaws I have in myself is that I have great ideas and I start off really hot. And then sometimes along the way, I find another idea that I'm very, very hot about, and it's hard to have that same vigor for the original idea. When I have this new idea, I want to stay in this mode of, because I have so much heat behind it, right? Listen, I'm using wrestling terms right now, but it's one of those, I understand it within myself, and I try to curtail that by understanding now, like, okay, well, what have other people done in order to get to that point? And I watch interviews constantly of people I respect. I watched I can't say her name. My girlfriend Maria constantly says, like, you've watched this Nipsey Hussle video. Like, you've literally watched it. I've seen you watch the same video this weekend over 3 times. Like, what do you keep watching? What are you watching? But for me, it's almost like repetition becomes memory. Yeah. The 10,000 words or 10,000 steps or whatever they say how you commit 10,000 hours. That's it. You commit 10,000 hours, it becomes knowledge. It becomes part of your knowledge base, right? And it's one of those things that I just like. I like to see people who are strong and composed, or even people who are outlandish and also very, very, very methodical with the way they go about things and the way they think. That was the longest pause of all time. But yeah, I love that aspect. Like Tupac is one of my favorites. Like John Lennon. I remember back in the day I used to say Humphrey Bogart. I love certain embodiments of certain characters and archetypes because I could see a part of myself in each one of these people, and it adds it to the total embodiment of what you eventually become, right?
Yeah, for sure. You're you're an amalgamation of whoever you look up to or whoever you're around as well.
Yeah, and that's also one of the things they say, like and I struggle with this. I struggle with this my whole life, probably up to this point. It's like, look at the 5 people that are closest to you. As they go, so will you. And I looked around my life and I saw I was around a lot of shitty people who were just fucked up on drugs or fucking around or staying up late and doing nothing. And it's like, well, I'm doing these things because I'm hanging out with these people too now. So where I'm going to end up and how do I cut this off in order to be around people who inspire
me? The thing that sucks for a lot of people is that sometimes those people that you aren't good to be around, it's not even that they're bad people. It's just you hang around people that they're good people, but they party and they eat like shit and whatever. They cheat on their girlfriends or they cheat on their boyfriends, all that, whatever. You're around that. I guess those people would be pieces of shit. Never mind. But okay, let's say all they do is just drink and party. They're 100% faithful. They're good people. But it's you're still gonna become that person, and it's even if they're not shitty people, do you want to become somebody that only ever drinks, that doesn't? I mean, that was huge for me, especially in the bar industry. They become your friends, but it also is just this never-ending loop of grabbing. Well, everybody wants to decompress after work, but when you decompress after work in a bar with your friends, you're 2 a.m. You're going to an after-hours bar. You're staying up till 5 or 6 a.m. And it's no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
So you do have to detach from, but it sucks because a lot of the times they're not
bad people.
It's just you're just if I want what I want.
Yeah.
If I want to be able to achieve what I want, I can't be fucking staying up till 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And it's that's what I think is the hardest part for a lot of people. You're I have no reason to not talk to you. Or not
hang around
talk because you shouldn't blow people up, but hang around. It's if all we're gonna do is sit and drink. So.
Yeah, even drinking, it's funny. 'Cause I love beer. I've gained weight since COVID, but beer is one of the things I shouldn't be drinking anymore because I'm trying to get fit again. But I love the taste of beer.
It's good,
and it's such a dichotomy to try and not drink and stay in shape and fit, and then be I deserve this beer. I've worked out really hard today, And I find that it's funny that even with I just lost my train of thought again. Even with with friends and you're being around people who are like that, and you still want to keep in touch with them, you almost have to completely cut ties at some point, or let those people change, or try to be the positive factor in their life in order to kind of usher that change in. But you can't be the person changing; they have to change themselves. You know what I mean?
I feel you can step away and you can go back in because now, I haven't drank since the last time I had a drink was July 4th.
Ever? Anything?
Yeah, I haven't had a drink in 5 months, 4, whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty close to 5 months.
But it's now I can, and even before that, before that I'd been drunk maybe 2 or 3 times in the last year or 2 before that. But I would have the casual drinks after a few, after a workout. But now that I actually have zero temptation to drink anymore, zero. I don't miss it at all ever. Mm-hmm. So I can go back into that scenario now and just be no, I'm good.
Yeah.
But now I can put myself back, with those people in that scenario and be and not feel compelled to act like it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So if you remove yourself, you can put yourself back in after. But it's very hard to break those habits if you're
still in it.
If you're in it all the time.
That's what I watched an interview with J. Cole. He said the same thing. It's he realized that alcohol had a grasp on him. Very interesting dude. I don't. All those new age dudes, I find J. Cole the most fascinating, him, Kendrick, and Drake, because his point of view is so varied. It's more multi-level, they're multi-layered, you know, like, but his whole thing was like, I can't go to a bar or even, you know, a bar's probably the wrong place to go, but even if you're going to a party and not have something in your hand, it's like a social lubricant, right? Like,
that's what it was for me. Like, I was extremely socially anxious.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's gone. I just know how to deal with it now.
Yeah.
But like, but before I didn't know how to deal with it other than to just drink.
Yeah.
And be like, but so that social lubricant aspect where it's just, again, it's going back to that idea where it's like we evolved to blend in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
It's what everyone
the
has to do.
quickest way to get noticed by everybody at a party is to not be the one not drinking.
Yeah.
It's like you stick out with a sore thumb. So, but
Yeah. It's interesting. Man, I told myself when so I asked you to be the first guest on the Gentleman's Guidebook because your brain is, I respect your brain.
oh, thank you. So much. You as well.
And I find you very inspiring. And I know, a couple months ago, even a couple years ago, before the pandemic or whatever the case is, we were just acquaintances. Like, you were my girlfriend's friend or whatever. I find now that you're like, I feel like I'm blowing smoke up your ass, right? But I find that the things that you're doing and the way you think is very, very inspirational, and that's why I like to put you on to other people and see other things. I want to tell you to continue doing what you're doing because I think you're really, you might not see it, but you're making an impact. Even for people that are already like, I consider myself evolved, but every time you post a video, I'm learning something different. You know, even now you're talking about the school system. I briefly knew about the school system through watching a YouTube video talking about it. But whether that's fact or fiction, I don't know because I never really researched it, right? But those type of things, and this is kind of coming to the close here, but even the aspect we're just talking about now, you know, being around people that inspire you or that you want to be around that elevate you to become better. I consider you that. So I wanted to tell you, like, thank you for being the first guest. I want to have you on more. It just sucks because this is like kind of ad hoc. The first thing, a couple of years from now, we'll be hopping and, you know, doing some different things here. But I think you're a really stand-up dude, and the friendship we've cultivated over these last couple of years has been fucking dope, man. And
dude, no, I
dope.
appreciate
I'm glad
that.
you're back in the scene.
Yeah, when we had that last talk, after we had that last talk, I was like, oh fuck, he gets it.
Yeah.
Like, he gets all of it. Like, so no,
it's dope, man. Thank you for coming through, man. I appreciate it. All right, that's it. Gentleman's Guidebook signing off. What was my tagline again? What's my tagline again? I don't remember. So next time you catch it next week, all right? You get your little tagline. Peace.